My name's Jacob Carter. I'm pushing 39 now, but this story starts 6 months back, when I was 38, living a life that felt as worn and familiar as the greasy overalls I wore every day. Home is Harmony Creek, Tennessee, one of those small towns tucked away where everybody knows your business, sometimes before you do. Before the day that split my life into before and after, I was just Jake, the mechanic down at O'Malley's garage. Solid work, paid the bills. Most days were a blur of engine oil, stubborn bolts, and the easy banter of guys who've worked side by side for years. My real life, the one that mattered most, started when I punched out. That was Emily, my wife, the steady rock in my often turbulent world. We met young, married young, and somehow navigated the choppy waters of raising 2 kids, Noah, who's 10 now, and Grace, 7. Evenings were usually homework chaos, dinner negotiations, and maybe an hour of quiet after the kids were down, often spent just sitting on the porch swing, listening to the crickets, too tired for much talk. Weekends were my escape hatch, usually involving a fishing rod, a quiet spot on the Tennessee River, and a cooler of beer. Trying to coax a catfish onto the line was about the most peace I allowed myself. Peace wasn't something I was well acquainted with. I'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan with the 101st Airborne out of Fort Campbell, just up the road. Came back changed, like most guys do. Saw things you can't unsee, lost buddies whose faces still visited me in the quiet hours. You carry that stuff. It settles in your bones, a low-grade hum of anxiety and guilt you learn to live with, mostly by not talking about it. I wasn't much for therapy, figured grit and time were the cures. They weren't. It just manifested in other ways, a short fuse sometimes, a tendency to withdraw, or reliance on a few too many beers to smooth the edges off the day. Faith. That was Emily's department. She grew up in the church, found genuine comfort there. Me? I tagged along on Sundays sometimes, mostly to keep the peace. I believed in God, in a vague, distant sort of way. Figured he was up there, busy running the universe, probably didn't have much time for a grease-stained mechanic from Tennessee. Prayer felt awkward, like talking into an empty room. I respected Emily's faith, admired it even, but it wasn't mine. I operated on self-reliance, on what I could see and fix with my own 2 hands. Spiritual stuff felt like a problem for later, maybe when I was old and had less to worry about. Seemed like I had plenty of time. That was my first big mistake. Life has a way of showing you just how wrong you can be, usually when you least expect it. The foundation I thought was solid was about to crumble, revealing something underneath I never knew existed. It happened on a Tuesday. October 17th. I remember the date because it hangs in my mind like a heavy anchor. The air had that crisp, early fall bite to it, the kind that makes you feel alive. Sunlight streamed through the high windows of the garage bay, catching dust motes dancing in the air. Just a normal morning. Mike Riley, my bay partner, was giving me grief about the Titans' latest loss while I wrestled with a seized bolt under a beat-up Ford F-150. I was lying on my creeper, wrench in hand, sweat trickling down my temples despite the cool air. "Come on, Jake, admit it, Tannehill's losing his touch," Mike chuckled, handing me a different socket. "Give the guy a break," I grunted, putting all my weight into the wrench. "Defense needs to step up." And then, it wasn't gradual. It was instantaneous. A white-hot, searing agony exploded in the center of my chest. It wasn't like heartburn or muscle strain, it was violent, visceral, like a bomb had detonated inside my ribcage. The wrench clattered onto the concrete. I gasped, but no air came. My vision tunneled, blackness creeping in from the edges. I heard Mike shout my name, his voice sounding distant, warped, like it was coming through water. "Jake. Jake. What's wrong?" I tried to answer, to say something, but my body wasn't mine anymore. The pain was absolute, consuming everything. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Everything stopped. The world dissolved into a profound, velvety blackness. Nothingness. Later, piecing it together from what Mike and the others told me, I learned I'd suffered a massive aortic aneurysm rupture. A weak spot in the main artery carrying blood from my heart, likely stressed and damaged over years, maybe from the physical toll of the army, the chronic stress I carried, maybe just bad genetic luck. It had burst without warning. My heart stopped beating right there on the oil-stained concrete floor of O'Malley's garage. Mike yelled. Someone hit the panic button that called straight through to 911. Guys I'd known for years, guys I shared coffee and complaints with every morning, were suddenly frantic, shouting, trying to figure out what to do. Old man O'Malley, who usually just sat in his office doing paperwork, was down on his knees beside me, his face pale. Mike, bless his heart, had taken a CPR course years ago and started chest compressions, his face grim, counting under his breath while waiting for the pros. The paramedics arrived fast, sirens screaming right up to the bay door. They pushed everyone back, ripped open my overalls, attached pads to my chest. I heard later they worked on me right there for what felt like an eternity to the onlookers. Defibrillator shocks, clear. The jolt, the pause, the continued compressions. They got a pulse back once, briefly, then lost it again. They loaded me onto the gurney, still working, bagging me, trying to force air into lungs that wouldn't respond. According to the hospital records, from the moment my heart stopped at the garage until they finally got a sustainable rhythm back in the ER, 12 minutes passed. 12 minutes where, by every medical definition, Jacob Carter was dead. No heartbeat, no breath, no brain activity. Just a cooling body being desperately fought over. But I wasn't gone. Not really. The pain vanished, the chaos faded, and then there was this shift. Like tuning a radio dial away from static into something else entirely. One moment, absolute agony and blackness. The next. I was floating. It wasn't a dreamlike sensation, it was surprisingly lucid, real. I was hovering near the ceiling of the garage bay, looking down. There was my body, sprawled awkwardly on the creeper, then moved to the floor. My face was slack, unervingly pale under the fluorescent lights. My work shirt was soaked, sticking to my chest. It was surreal, like watching a movie scene starring someone who just happened to look exactly like me. I saw the paramedics, their movements efficient, urgent. I saw Mike, pushed against the wall, his face buried in his hands. I saw Mr. O'Malley pacing, wringing his hands. I heard the flatline tone of the heart monitor they'd hooked up, a sound that, bizarrely, didn't frighten me. Instead, an overwhelming sense of calm, of profound peace, washed over me. It was like stepping out of a torrential downpour into a warm, quiet room. The fear, the pain, the frantic struggle, it was all connected to that body down there, that shell. And I wasn't in it anymore. I felt free. Detached, observant, and utterly, inexplicably calm. The life I knew was playing out its desperate final act below me, but I was already somewhere else. The detachment was startling. There was no panic about the lifeless form below, no desperate urge to rejoin it. It was more like looking at an old, broken-down truck I used to drive. Fond memories, maybe, but definitely not me anymore. The sounds of the garage, the shouts, the whine of the defibrillator charging, the rhythmic compression counts, began to fade, as if someone was slowly turning down the volume on the world. The scene below grew dimmer, less distinct. Then came a sensation, not physical, but undeniable, a gentle, insistent pull. Like a cosmic tide drawing me away. The garage, the faces, the sounds, they dissolved completely, receding until they were gone. I found myself enveloped in a darkness unlike any I'd ever known. It wasn't the absence of light, like a moonless night or a deep cave. This was something more fundamental. An absolute void. Utterly silent, completely featureless, stretching infinitely in every direction. There was no sense of up or down, no ground beneath, no sky above. Just me, Or the consciousness that was me, suspended in this immense, profound emptiness. Time lost all meaning. Was I there for a second? An hour? 1,000 years? It was impossible to say. The framework of minutes and days simply didn't apply. Initially, disorientation flickered. I'd faced death head-on in firefights, seen its brutal immediacy. This was different. This wasn't violence, it was nothing. A terrifying concept for a mind used to constant input, constant struggle. But the fear didn't last. The peace I'd felt hovering over my body deepened, permeated this void. It wasn't a cold, empty peace, but a stillness pregnant with potential. And in that stillness, something stirred within my core. Stripped bare of my body, my job, my roles as husband and father, my past traumas and future worries, what was left? It was a raw awareness, a sense of self distilled to its essence. And from that essence arose a feeling I hadn't consciously acknowledged in years, maybe ever with such intensity, a longing. A deep, aching, soul-level yearning for connection. For meaning. For something more than the transient struggles of earthly life. I didn't think the word God. It was deeper than language. It was an intrinsic pull towards the source of that peace, the source of existence itself. All those years of hedging my bets, of keeping faith at arm's length, of relying solely on my own strength, they felt suddenly, profoundly foolish. In that absolute void, my self-reliance was meaningless. My heart, my consciousness, whatever I was, cried out silently into the vastness, not with words, but with the sheer force of that newly awakened need. Show me. Help me. I need you. It felt like the universe paused, listening. And then, infinitesimally small at first, a single point of light punctured the darkness. It wasn't far away in the conventional sense, distance felt irrelevant here. It was simply, present. Like a lone star emerging in an endless night sky. It didn't explode into brightness. It grew, steadily, organically, like something alive. And as it expanded, it wasn't just light, it was warmth. A gentle, radiating heat that felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. The light wasn't harsh or blinding, it was soft, inviting, possessing a quality I can only describe as personal. It felt like pure, unadulterated love made visible. I didn't consciously decide to move towards it. The light drew me. It wasn't a physical pull anymore, but a magnetic resonance, my entire being resonating with its frequency. The infinite darkness dissolved, melted away not by being overpowered, but by being absorbed into this growing luminescence. I felt enveloped, embraced, bathed in a glow that penetrated to the very core of my consciousness. It felt utterly familiar, like rediscovering a forgotten part of myself. The loneliness of the void vanished, replaced by an absolute certainty, I was known. I was welcomed. I was not alone. This light wasn't just a light, it was the light. And I knew, with a conviction that transcended thought, who awaited me within it. As the light intensified, it didn't just surround me, it became the environment. It wasn't like standing in a sunbeam, it was like being within the sun, yet without being consumed. The warmth was profound, a love so palpable it felt like a physical substance, yet infinitely gentle. And within this heart of living light, a form emerged. He stepped forward, or perhaps the light coalesced around him. There was no dramatic entrance, no fanfare, just a presence that filled everything. And I knew him. Instantly. Unequivocally. Jesus. It wasn't the face from the paintings in Emily's childhood church, the gentle shepherd with doe eyes. This face was more. It held an impossible combination of infinite majesty and intimate familiarity. His eyes weren't just organs of sight, they were wells of ancient wisdom, profound compassion, and a love so pure, so unconditional, it stripped away every pretense I ever had. Looking into his eyes, I felt completely seen, every mistake, every hidden hurt, every fleeting kindness, and utterly, perfectly loved not in spite of it, but because of it all. A smile touched his lips, and it was like the dawn breaking after a long night. It wasn't just a facial expression, it radiated joy, peace, and a gentle amusement, washing away the last vestiges of any fear or uncertainty within me. Every wall I'd built around my heart, every defense mechanism honed by war and life's hardships, simply crumbled into dust under the power of that smile. Then he spoke, and his voice wasn't just sound waves hitting an eardrum I no longer possessed. It resonated within my very being, a vibration of truth and love. It was simultaneously powerful like thunder rolling across mountains and gentle like a stream flowing over smooth stones. It held authority, yet infinite tenderness. "Jacob," he said, and hearing my name spoken by him felt like the most profound validation I could ever experience. "Welcome. Your journey isn't finished yet. But there is much I want to show you." There was no sense of judgment for my lukewarm faith, my years of spiritual procrastination. Only acceptance. Only love. It was overwhelming, humbling, and yet incredibly freeing. The weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying, the guilt from the war, the stress of providing, the unspoken fears, lifted completely. I felt lighter than air, buoyant in his presence. With his words, the environment shifted again, instantaneously but without any jarring transition. The pure light remained the backdrop, the very atmosphere, but now it illuminated a landscape of breathtaking beauty. We weren't traveling, in a physical sense, it was more like reality itself reshaped around us at his will. This was heaven. There was no other word for it. But it defied every simplistic image I'd ever half-consciously held. The air itself felt alive, thrumming with a gentle energy, a vibration of pure joy and peace that I could feel resonating within me, like my soul was finally tuned to its native frequency. Colors exploded around us with an intensity and vibrancy I'd never conceived of. Greens of rolling hills so rich and deep they made earthly emeralds look dull. Blues in the sky and water that contained hues unknown on earth, shimmering with internal light. Golds that weren't just metallic, but flowed like liquid sunlight, composing structures and pathways. Flowers bloomed everywhere, not in neat garden beds, but in wild, joyful profusion. Their petals weren't just colored, they glowed from within, emitting soft light and intricate fragrances that blended into a perfume of pure bliss. A river, clearer than any glass, wound through the landscape. It didn't just reflect the light, it seemed to contain it, sparkling with millions of tiny, diamond-like flecks, as if stars had dissolved within its current. The sound it made wasn't just the rush of water, it was music, a complex, harmonious melody that seemed to sing of life and joy. Jesus stood beside me, his presence a source of constant comfort and strength. He didn't need to hold my hand, his nearness was connection enough. He gestured towards the unfolding panorama with that same gentle smile. "This is but a glimpse, Jacob," he said, his voice echoing the music of the river. "A shadow of the home prepared for those who love me." The immensity of it all was staggering, yet instead of feeling intimidated, I felt like I belonged. Like I had finally, truly, come home. We began to walk, though walk feels too mundane a word. It was more like gliding, effortless movement across terrain that felt both solid and yielding beneath my feet I didn't technically have, yet the sensation was real. The grass covering the rolling hills wasn't just green, it shimmered with countless shades, feeling softer than silk, cool and alive against my perceived skin. Jesus led me towards a colossal tree that dominated the landscape, its branches reaching impossibly high, seeming to brush against the luminous sky. Its leaves were a vibrant, shifting kaleidoscope of colors, and hanging heavy from its boughs was fruit unlike anything imaginable. As I watched, a cluster of fruit shimmered, changing from a deep, ruby red to a brilliant, sun gold, then to a sapphire blue, each transition seamless, beautiful. "The tree of life," Jesus said simply, his voice filled with quiet reverence. "Its leaves are for the healing of the nations, and its fruit sustains life eternal here." He gestured for me to take some. Hesitantly, I reached out. My hand passed through a glowing, apple-like fruit, yet somehow, I held it. It felt cool, vibrant, pulsing with gentle energy. I brought it to my lips and took a bite. The taste, how to describe it? It was like experiencing joy, peace, and love as flavors. It held echoes of every perfect fruit I'd ever tasted on earth, the sweetness of a ripe peach, the tang of a fresh berry, the richness of a mango, but magnified 1,000-fold, blended into a single, harmonious explosion of pure delight that seemed to nourish not just my form, but my very soul. Here, there is no hunger, no thirst, no decay, Jesus explained. Only fullness of life, constantly renewed. As we moved onward, I became aware of others. Not ghosts or ethereal wisps, but vibrant, solid-looking individuals radiating an inner light, their faces etched with profound joy and serenity. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands, visible across the landscape. They were diverse, people from every conceivable background, nation, and era, yet there was an unmistakable unity among them. They were interacting, some talking and laughing in groups, others working together on tasks I couldn't quite comprehend, building with light, tending to the glowing flora, creating music that harmonized with the river's song. And then I saw him. Standing near a grove of shimmering, silver-barked trees, talking animatedly with a small group. Sergeant Thomas Bellwether. Tom. My squad leader from my first tour. He'd been killed instantly by an IED just outside Kandahar, a loss that had hit me hard, fueling years of survivor's guilt. But here he was. He looked younger than I remembered him, maybe in his late 20s, lean and strong, his face free from the lines of stress and weariness that deployment had etched onto it. He wore simple, flowing robes of a soft white material, but his posture was still unmistakably Tom. He turned, saw me, and his eyes widened in recognition. A broad, genuine grin spread across his face, a grin I'd rarely seen back in the sandbox. He strode over, clapping me firmly on the shoulder. The contact felt real, solid. Jacob Carter. Well, I'll be, he boomed, his voice filled with warmth. Knew you'd make it eventually, though maybe not quite so soon. Tom. I stammered, overwhelmed. You look good. He laughed, a hearty, uncomplicated sound. Better than good, Jake. Whole. Finally whole. There was no rank here, no chain of command, just the easy camaraderie of brothers in arms, purified and perfected. Lots to see, lots to learn, he added, gesturing around us. He'll show you. Listen well. He gave my shoulder another squeeze and then rejoined his group, leaving me reeling with a mix of shock, joy, and profound relief. Seeing him, so alive, so happy, healed a wound in me I hadn't known was still bleeding. Animals roamed freely through this paradise, utterly devoid of fear or aggression. I saw creatures that resembled earthly lions, their manes like spun gold, lying peacefully near playing children whose laughter echoed like wind chimes. Majestic birds, similar to eagles but larger and iridescent, soared overhead, sometimes carrying people gently on their backs through the luminous air. In the sparkling river, beings like dolphins, shimmering with internal light, leaped and played alongside people who swam with effortless grace. Jesus chuckled softly beside me, the sound pure music. All creation restored, Jacob, he explained. The original harmony. Here, you understand their praise, and they understand your heart. No more fear, no more predator and prey, only fellowship under the Creator. In the distance, bathed in a light even more intense, rose a city. Its structures weren't made of stone or metal, but seemed woven from solidified light, shimmering gold, pearl, and crystal. Towers pierced the heavens, glowing with an internal radiance, their architecture both impossibly grand and exquisitely intricate. It pulsed with life, a beacon of divine order and beauty. New Jerusalem, Jesus murmured. The dwelling place of God and His people. But heaven is more than just a place, Jacob. It is a state of being, centered on love and purpose. He turned to face me fully, his eyes holding mine, signaling that the next part of my journey was about to begin. Standing there, bathed in the glory of the city of light, Jesus turned his gaze fully upon me. It wasn't accusatory, but it was penetrating, seeing right through me. Before you can fully understand what is, you must understand what was, he said softly. And then, it unfolded. Not like watching a movie screen, but like reliving my life, simultaneously from my own perspective and from an objective, all-knowing viewpoint. Every moment, from childhood innocence to the hardened soldier, to the preoccupied husband and father, flashed before me, or rather, through me. The good, the bad, the mundane, the moments of courage, the moments of cowardice, the acts of kindness, the harsh words spoken in anger. I saw myself snapping at Noah for spilling his juice, the hurt flicker in his eyes magnified 1,000 times. I saw a moment in Afghanistan where my hesitation might have contributed to a comrade's injury, the guilt washing over me with fresh, unbearable intensity. I saw the times I dismissed Emily's attempts to connect, too wrapped up in my own fatigue or frustrations, and felt the quiet ache it caused her. I saw the small, forgotten kindnesses too, helping a stranded motorist, sharing my lunch with a struggling rookie at the garage, a quiet word of encouragement to a fellow vet. Each action, thought, and intention was laid bare, its ripples spreading outwards, affecting others in ways I'd never perceived. The pain wasn't inflicted by Jesus, it arose from within me, the stark contrast between my often self-centered actions and the perfect love that now surrounded me. Shame washed over me, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to turn away, to hide, but there was nowhere to hide from this loving, truthful gaze. Jesus placed a hand gently on my chest, right over my heart. The sensation was one of warmth and profound empathy. "You carried this burden, Jacob," he said, his voice filled with compassion. "The guilt, the regret, the pain. But I carried it too. Every moment you suffered, every mistake you made, every tear you shed, I was there, sharing the load, longing for you to turn to me." He showed me specific instances, a lonely night on deployment, a bitter argument with Emily, a moment of despair after losing Tom, and in each memory, I now perceived his presence, subtle, unnoticed at the time, but undeniably there, offering strength, offering solace. Then, he distilled the essence of his teachings, not as abstract rules, but as living truths that sank into the core of my being. "First," he said, his eyes holding mine, "understand that life itself is meant to be a prayer. Not just the words you might stumble over on Sunday, but the way you live each moment. How you love your wife, how you guide your children, how you treat the stranger, how you approach your work. Every act of selfless love, every moment of patience, every choice for integrity, every helping hand offered, these are hymns sung to the Creator. They resonate here. Your daily life is your offering." Second, he continued, his gaze softening as he addressed the pain I'd just relived, pain and suffering are not punishments, but opportunities. They are the soil in which resilience, compassion, and faith can grow, if you allow it. Every tear shed in empathy, every struggle overcome through reliance on me, every scar borne with grace, these water seeds of eternal value. Here, you will see the beautiful tapestry woven from those threads of earthly sorrow, transformed into strength and glory. He gave me a glimpse, a flash of understanding, of how hardships faced with faith were building something beautiful and lasting within the souls of believers, something invisible on earth but radiant here. And third, his voice became imbued with gentle urgency, "You are here now, seeing this, feeling this, for a reason. You are to share this hope. Not to condemn or judge those still walking the path, but to be a light. To gently remind them of the love that awaits, the purpose behind their struggles, the reality of home that waits beyond the veil. Many have forgotten, Jacob. Many, like you, think they have plenty of time, chasing things that fade. Remind them. Point them towards me." Then, he broadened my perspective again. My awareness expanded, and I could perceive Earth. Not as a map, but as a sphere of swirling energy, teeming with souls. I saw people rushing, striving, worrying, chasing money, status, fleeting pleasures, often blind to the spiritual realities underpinning their existence. I saw the quiet desperation in some, the hardened cynicism in others, the genuine seeking in a few. I saw people delaying their connection to God, just as I had, caught in the illusion of infinite tomorrows. Simultaneously, I became aware of the edge of heaven, a place vibrant with loving energy, where countless souls, perhaps loved ones who had passed on, perhaps angelic beings, were focused intently on earth. I could perceive their prayers, not as words, but as streams of light and love directed towards struggling individuals, towards families, towards nations. These prayers intertwined with the prayers rising from earth, creating a powerful, dynamic connection, a bridge of light between the realms. Heaven and earth are not as separate as you believed, Jesus stated, his gaze encompassing both realities. The veil is thin. What is done in love, faith, and prayer on earth echoes powerfully here. And the love and intercession from here constantly reach back. It is one unfolding story, one kingdom, destined to be fully united when all things are made new. The understanding settled deep within me, our lives mattered infinitely more than I had ever imagined. Standing in the eternal presence of heaven, enveloped in perfect love, witnessing the interconnectedness of all things, the last thing I wanted was to leave. This was peace beyond understanding, joy beyond description, belonging beyond imagining. This was home. Why would anyone choose to return to the struggle, the pain, the limitations of earthly life? My heart ached with a longing to stay. Tears, which felt like liquid light, welled up and flowed freely. Lord, I whispered, the word imbued with a reverence I'd never felt before, I want to stay. Please, let me stay here with you. Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with an understanding deeper than the cosmos. He gently cupped my face, his touch sending waves of comforting energy through me. It wasn't a rebuke, but his gaze was firm. And you will, Jacob, he reassured me, his voice tender but unwavering. Your place here is prepared and awaits you. But, not yet. He let the words hang in the luminous air, allowing their weight to settle. They need to hear, Jacob. Emily needs the reassurance only you can give her now. Noah and Grace need their father, guided by this new light. The men you served with, the guys at the garage, the countless others stumbling in the twilight, forgetting the dawn that awaits, they need to hear that this is real. That I am real and that I love them. His eyes held mine, searching my soul. Will you go back for them? Will you carry this message, this light, back into the world? It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. A choice. And suddenly, my perspective shifted. Selfishly, I wanted to stay. But the love I felt here wasn't just for receiving, it compelled sharing. I thought of Emily's steadfast faith, deserving of this profound confirmation. I pictured Noah's inquisitive eyes and Grace's bright smile, imagining sharing this hope with them. I thought of Mike, of the guys, of fellow veterans lost in their own private battles. Could my story be a lifeline for even one of them? The love I felt from Jesus wasn't possessive, it was generative. It created a desire within me to reflect that love back into the broken world I'd left behind. The choice was clear, though incredibly difficult. Yes, Lord, I managed, my voice thick with emotion, breaking slightly. I understand. I'll go back. I'll tell them. A radiant smile spread across Jesus' face, brighter than the city of light behind him. It was a smile of approval, of promise, of unwavering support. Fear not, he said, his voice resonant with power and tenderness. I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Speak what you have seen and heard. Love as you have been loved. And when your work there is truly done, I will bring you home. The light surrounding us seemed to intensify, swirling, embracing me in a final, powerful hug of pure energy. Then came the sensation of falling, not downwards in a physical sense, but a rapid withdrawal, a pulling back, like being drawn through a narrowing tunnel at incredible speed. The brilliance faded, replaced by a rushing darkness, and then... wham! A violent jolt, like hitting solid ground after a long fall. Air flooded my lungs, raw and cold, burning its way in. My eyes flew open, assaulted by harsh, blinding fluorescent lights overhead. Beeping sounds, frantic and loud, filled my ears. There were faces looming over me, masked, urgent. "He's back. We've got a pulse." Strong rhythm, a voice shouted, laced with disbelief. It sounded like one of the paramedics from the garage scene, now in the controlled chaos of an ER bay. Hands were pressing on me, checking my neck, my chest. A tube scratched uncomfortably down my throat. Machines shrieked their electronic reports of my sudden return to the land of the living. I tried to move, to speak, but my body felt incredibly heavy, sluggish, alien. Yet, beneath the immediate shock and discomfort, I felt something else, or rather, the absence of something. The searing pain in my chest was gone. Completely. The profound weakness that had plagued me for months before the collapse vanished. Doctors and nurses swarmed in, a blur of blue scrubs and focused intensity. I heard snippets of their bewildered conversation. Blood pressure stabilizing. Oxygen sats are up. How is this possible? One doctor, older, with graying hair, was staring intently at a monitor displaying scans, then back at me, then back at the scans. "The rupture, it's not there," he muttered to a colleague, utter confusion on his face. "The aorta looks intact. Completely intact. Spontaneous resolution. I've never seen anything like it." They'd call it spontaneous healing in my chart, a medical anomaly they couldn't explain. But I knew. It wasn't spontaneous, it was a gift. A confirmation. The first face I truly focused on was Emily's. She burst through the doors moments later, security trying gently to hold her back. Her face was tear-streaked, pale with terror and exhaustion, but her eyes locked onto mine. She rushed to my bedside, grabbing my hand, clutching it like a lifeline. "Jake! Oh God, Jake! They said you were gone," she sobbed, her relief so potent it was almost painful. I squeezed her hand weakly. The breathing tube prevented speech, but I looked into her eyes, trying to pour everything I just experienced into that gaze. Later, when the tube was out, my voice raw and hoarse, the first real words I managed to whisper were, "I saw him, Em. It's real. I saw Jesus." And in that moment, seeing the flicker of awe mix with relief in her eyes, I knew my new journey had already begun. Recovery was bewilderingly fast. Doctors kept running tests, comparing scans, shaking their heads. The massive, fatal aneurysm that had ruptured was simply gone. My aorta looked healthy, undamaged. They monitored me closely for neurological damage. 12 minutes without oxygen to the brain should have left devastating consequences. But cognitive tests came back normal, even slightly sharper than before, they joked uneasily. They used terms like medical miracle and inexplicable recovery, but mostly they just seemed baffled, documenting everything meticulously while lacking any real explanation within their framework. They discharged me within a week, cautioning me to take it easy, though physically, I felt better than I had in years. The chronic fatigue, the background hum of stress-related aches, all gone. The real adjustment wasn't physical, it was spiritual and mental. Coming back to the mundane world after experiencing the vibrant reality of heaven was jarring. Colors seemed faded, sounds dull. The constant low-level anxiety and striving that permeated everyday life felt alien and unnecessary. But Jesus's words echoed, "Love as you have been loved. Speak what you have seen." Word spread through Harmony Creek like wildfire. "Did you hear about Jake Carter? Died right there at O'Malley's. Dead 12 minutes. Came back without a scratch." People looked at me differently. Curiosity, skepticism, awe, it was all there in their eyes. Neighbors brought casseroles, ostensibly for my recovery, but really hoping for a glimpse of the man who came back. Sharing it wasn't easy at first. How do you put the infinite into finite words? How do you describe colors that don't exist here, a love that transcends emotion, a peace that surpasses understanding? I started with Emily and the kids. Sitting on our porch swing one evening, the crickets chirping their familiar song, I told them everything. About the OBE, the darkness, the light, Jesus, Tom, the tree of life, the city, the lessons. Noah listened intently, asking a million questions only a 10-year-old could. Were there dinosaurs, Dad? Could you fly super fast? Grace, younger, just snuggled close, seemingly understanding the feeling behind the words more than the details. Emily listened with tears streaming down her face, her own deep faith finding profound resonance and confirmation in my experience. It forged a new depth of connection between us, a shared understanding that transcended everyday worries. Then, hesitantly, I shared it at church. Not from the pulpit, but in a small group meeting. The reactions were mixed. Some wept, deeply moved. Others looked uncomfortable, perhaps challenged. A few seemed politely dismissive, maybe thinking the trauma had caused hallucinations. But the pastor, a thoughtful man named David, encouraged me. Jacob, he said, some seeds fall on rocky ground, others on fertile soil. Just sow the seed. So I kept talking. I talked to Mike and the guys at the garage during lunch breaks. I shared my story at a VFW meeting, standing before fellow veterans, men who knew the face of death, men carrying invisible wounds just like I had. That was powerful. Seeing nods of understanding, seeing hardened faces soften, seeing a glimmer of hope rekindled in eyes that had seen too much darkness, that fueled me. Someone suggested I write it down. Just for myself, initially. To capture the details before they faded. Pouring it onto the page, late at night after Emily and the kids were asleep, felt like reliving it, reinforcing the reality of it. That journal, filled with my clumsy descriptions and heartfelt reflections, somehow found its way into the hands of a small Christian publisher through a connection Pastor David had. They titled it Beyond the Void, A Soldier's Return from Heaven. I didn't expect much. But the book struck a chord. Letters started pouring in. Emails flooded my inbox. People from all walks of life, soldiers grappling with PTSD, grieving parents searching for hope, doctors questioning the limits of science, skeptics intrigued despite themselves, ordinary people feeling lost and seeking meaning. They shared their own stories, their own struggles, their own flicker of hope ignited by my account. I ended up speaking at more churches, veterans groups, conferences, even a few medical forums where doctors grilled me respectfully but intensely. Life didn't become easy overnight. I still fix cars at O'Malley's, gotta pay the bills. But how I live is different. That guy who cuts me off in traffic. Instead of the old surge of anger, I feel a pang of compassion. Maybe he's rushing to a sick kid. I whisper a quick prayer for him. When Noah and Grace are bickering, the impatience is still there, but it's tempered now by the memory of that life review, the importance of love in small moments. I pull them close instead of yelling. Emily and I talk more, really talk, about faith, about fears, about the echoes of heaven in the everyday. Nature is profoundly alive to me now. A sunset isn't just pretty, it's a brushstroke from the divine artist, a reminder of the colors I saw. The wind rustling through the trees sounds like a whisper of the harmony there. The river flows with a deeper meaning. It's all infused with his presence, reminders that heaven isn't just a future destination, but a reality that intersects with ours right now. Looking back at that Tuesday 6 months ago, I see it clearly. Jacob Carter, the self-reliant mechanic, the scarred veteran running on fumes, died on that garage floor. But the person who woke up in the ER, the person telling you this story now, truly started living. Jesus didn't just heal my aorta, he healed my soul. He showed me that heaven is our true home, a place of unimaginable love and purpose, waiting for all who accept his invitation. But he also showed me that we don't have to wait until death to experience fragments of that reality. Every act of love, every prayer, every moment we choose faith over fear, brings a little bit of heaven to earth. My message, born from 12 minutes in eternity, is simple: don't wait. Don't put off the most important connection you'll ever make. Whether you're 24, 68, or anywhere in between, time is precious and unguaranteed. Talk to Jesus. You don't need fancy words. Just offer him your heart, your hurts, your hopes, raw and real. Ask him to reveal himself to you. And then, live each day intentionally, as if it were a prayer. Because it is. Heaven is real. He is real. And he's calling you home. The only question is, will you answer? Thanks for listening. If this story resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share the hope. Keep the light burning.